I'd like to get our meeting started. Rhonda, do we have everyone we need?
We have 4 out of 5 board members, and we have a few alternates that will probably be joining us because of the training.
Excellent. So are you comfortable with us starting our meeting?
Yes, we
Okay.
have Vice Chair now joining us, so we have everyone.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our Wednesday, September 16th board meeting. I hope all is well, and I just want to take a moment to share my gratitude for everyone coming together today and making Mountain Mind the excellent organization that it is. And with that said, could we have roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board. City of Flagstaff, Jim McCarthy.
I'm here.
Thank you. City of Flagstaff, Jamie Whelan.
Present.
And we are expecting Vice Mayor Adam Shimoni to join us possibly for the training. Coconino County Art Babbitt. Art, are you with us? Muted. Oh, he dropped off. Okay. We show that you're with us. Maybe you're muted. I'll come back. NAU, Deanna Coley.
Present.
Thank you. And we also have NAU, Josh Meyer.
Present.
Thank you. CCC, Steve Peru.
Present.
Thank you. And we are also expecting from CCC the alternate Kurt Stahl. I don't believe he's on yet.
Present.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kurt. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Rhonda. Sam, will you talk to us about your safety?
Sorry, Madam Chair, we have a phone number that just was admitted. Can we ask who that is? Who just joined the meeting by phone? If you could please identify yourself.
They've muted themselves.
It looks like you're muted.
It's Art.
Awesome.
Are you sure it's
Okay.
all right? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Sam, would you take it away with our safety minute?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This month's safety minute is flu vaccination during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's likely that flu viruses and the viruses that cause COVID-19 will both spread this fall and winter. Healthcare systems could be overwhelmed treating both patients with flu and patients with COVID-19. This means getting a flu vaccine during the fall and winter of 2020 and 2021. While getting a flu vaccine will not protect against COVID-19, there are many important benefits. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have advised that flu vaccines have been shown to reduce the risk of flu illness, hospitalization, and death. A 2017 study was the first of its kind to show significantly reduce a child's risk of dying from the flu. The flu vaccine has been shown to reduce the risk of having to go to the doctor with the flu by 40%. Vaccinating a woman who is pregnant to help protect the baby from flu infection for several months after birth, before the baby can be vaccinated. Flu vaccines also save healthcare resources for the care of patients with COVID-19. For example, it is estimated during the 2018-2019 flu vaccinations prevented an estimated 4.4 million influenza illnesses, 2.3 million influenza-associated medical visits, 58,000 influenza-associated hospitalizations, and 3,500 influenza-associated deaths. These are just a few of the many benefits of getting the flu vaccine this fall. Welcome to the September board meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So now we move on to item number 4, and that's approval of the minutes of 8/19/2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, Jim McCarthy, I move to approve the minutes of 8/9.
Thank you, Jim. And do I have a second?
This is Steve.
Second.
And Steve, so I have a motion from Jim McCarthy and a second from Steve. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all those in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. There are no consent items on our consent agenda, or shall I say lack of consent agenda. So we'll just start moving right along to item number 5, rules of procedure and code of conduct training. Scott, would you take that away?
I will be glad to. And I'm glad you're showing this, although I did put a tie on and a shirt. So if in case I was on video, I will plead the fifth on whether I'm wearing pants or not, though. The Mountain Lion Board adopted a code of conduct this past year, and we wanted to go do some training on it. The code of conduct includes articles on public records and conflicts, which I think every member of this board is very familiar with in relation to your service for various government members of Mountain Lion. So we wanted to focus on things dealing with social media representing Mountain Lion and our expectations at board meetings. So if you could go to the next slide, please. First one, I wanted this is important. I do want this to be a lecture. As Mitesh, when he does this presentation, says it's not one of his lectures at ASU. It's much more valuable if we have this as a discussion. And since I can't really see the participants that well, but if you could be willing to speak up and ask questions or make comments as we're going through this, I think that would be helpful for everyone. And with that, let's go to the next slide. The areas we're going to be covering today are this Article 2 of the Code of Conduct with social media, Article 4, representing Mountain Lion, and Article 5, meeting decorum. This is an overview. Our major focus is going to be on social media, and I'm not going to be going through specific provisions, although we can talk about that in the Code of Conduct, but this is really to try to give a roadmap for everyone as what the Code of Conduct and what Mountain Lion expects from board members. And actually, it's important to note that there's portions of the Code of Conduct that applies to employees as well in relation to these areas. So next slide, please. One of the questions we've gotten when doing this type of presentation is that are you trying to discourage social media posts and use of social media? We're not trying to discourage it at all. But and we're not encouraging you to lie, hide, or provide incomplete information. The idea here is to make you think before you write. Which, if you see a lot of the government tweets and things that are going out, and that's not always what happens before social media goes out. It's most important. This is probably the most important point of the presentation. Social media in this day and age, and Mountain Line uses it effectively, is extremely relevant and very important to being able to communicate with your constituents. But the idea here is to give you some guidelines and some lessons learned. And go to the next slide, please. By the way, I want, just on a personal note, part of my strongest opinions and understanding of social media came about over a decade ago when my oldest daughter went to NAU, and they do a phenomenal presentation on, at that time it was Facebook and social media, and how it can be effectively used and how dangerous it is. And because of that, I swore off of Facebook completely. I'm old enough that I can avoid that at this point, but having seen that, it was one of the scariest things I've seen in a long time, of where that can go sideways, particularly for young people. But that said, social media is a very powerful tool. And there's some examples of good use is shown here, where the county uses Facebook to interconnect residents with resources after mudslides. Minneapolis uses TikTok to raise census awareness. Maryland uses Instagram stories to obtain school safety feedback. I'm also the town attorney for Queen Creek, which also has a very effective and robust use of social media to get information out on a immediate basis. And so it is, beyond just what Mountain Line uses, it is a very important tool. Next slide. Social media is also, it enhances your communication, creates that sense of trust and transparency if used appropriately. It's now expected, as much as anything else is expected from your constituents. And for some people, it's the only way that they can receive information, and it is unparalleled for speed. And it allows you to do things beyond just voice and print. You can use videos and all the various graphic tools that are available in social media to get things out quickly. Next slide. One thing about social media, because of its breadth and its speed, and a lot of people don't seem to know, really comprehend this or how it's used, is that it's much broader audience than you think. Judges, juries, that's things that lawyers look at as much as anything else, media or lawyers. My personal rule that I use, I am been served on a school board for 16 years. And the rule that I use in relation to my communications in that regard, I look at it the worst enemy rule. Anything that I put into writing, and once I put it out onto social media and or email, I lose control of it. And so I look at it, okay, what would my worst enemy do with this information or what I've written? Because that's who I've got to assume will utilize it. In my law practice, my rule is, how would I feel if a judge or a jury saw what I put in writing? While social people think of social media being quick and it's out there and it's gone, it's not. Social media never goes away, and you have to assume that the posts are permanent. The records that may be taken out of context are out there. In fact, if you think about it, most of the servers and devices that transmit social media are totally out of your control. Some of them are out of the country, and it's stored there. So the concept that social media is just now and it'll be now and gone, you can't take that position at all. Next slide. This is also something that's useful is the New York Times rule. Says every time you prepare yourself, ask if this were published on the front page of the New York Times, would it be clear to the world that what I'm talking about, and how would it look to the reader? Or could I defend what I said on the witness stand? Next slide. Well, most people think that email means electronic mail. Actually, one of my partners gave me this. Email actually means evidence made available in litigation. I can tell you in my practice in litigation, particularly in complex commercial litigation, construction, and the government litigation I've been involved in, there is not a single case that I have been involved in where email or social media posts in some regard have not resolved the case for good or for bad, mostly bad. And in fact, in domestic relations cases, that is now the largest area of factual evidence. Our posts on Facebook and Instagram and other social media tweets, all of that stuff becomes a treasure trove of evidence for people who are trying to make claims against you. And so, email, while it is not strictly social media, it gives good examples of the problems of social media. Could you go to the next slide? This is an excerpt from the deposition of Bill Gates, the CEO of Microsoft. This is in the antitrust lawsuit brought against them by Apple. And look at that quickly. The question was, at the time you wrote this email, didn't you have any expectation that it was going to show up in this litigation? Did you? I'm not sure what you mean by that. What I mean is you thought that this was a private email. You thought you were writing to your executives, and you didn't think anyone outside the company was going to review this and do what I'm doing now, which is ask you questions about it, right? Mr. Gates, I think the general notion that any email I write might be reviewed at some point in time is one I've understood since 1990. The absolute same is true of social media on all its forms. Next slide. This is a slide shows sort of the hierarchy of social media, but it also shows the dangers. Because when we wrote letters, I'm sure some of you still remember letters, but when we wrote letters, they're formal in nature. You really thought about it. They're businesslike. You used proper grammar and punctuation. And you had a limited danger zone because the letter was going to one person, and they're the only ones received it at that time. And so people thought very carefully about what they put into letters. Email is less formal. It's created in haste. Not only in haste, but a lot of them are created in anger or in jest, neither of which work well. And then it has a potential for poorly thought out communications. There's a lot of times where email miscommunicates more than it communicates. And it's even more true in social media. The texting editing, there's a major danger zone. There's no formality, no grammar. It's not thought out. You start using your thumbs. You write it as you're thinking about it. And people like to send out social media things are like. It's just in this day and age, it's a natural action to put it when you're foul language, angry or sarcastic, all of which can come back to haunt you when these things are when you're using social media in your official role. Next slide, please. The rules for clear business writing, these should be rules that you apply to what you write in social media in a formal capacity. It says you focus on the facts, be truthful and accurate, close the loop, avoid sensational and exaggerated language, and keep focused on the true goal. All those things are important, but that's the last one is the one that I keep finding myself going back to is you do all those other things, but after you're through looking at it, go back and say, why am I writing this? And that is one of the most effective tools for bringing, keeping your social media communications in a proper form. Next slide. Just an example of sensational or exaggerated language. I've just about had it with those contractors from XYZ company. They are like Keystone Cops. And as far as I can tell, you are never going to get our street project completed. That's talking about somebody else. Here's next slide. This is an example from talking about your own organization. Without these improvements, this department is a time bomb waiting to explode. If I'm an attorney on the other side, I love to see that type of thing. But also, even if you're not in litigation, that type of language, while may be very descriptive, can cause huge problems. Think of what would happen if that type of thing got into a newspaper or it became the focus of a chat in relation to Mountain Line or your other, government entities. Next slide. It's also important to note in your official capacity that social media can be a public record. And I'm sure you've all been involved in public records requests and had the public record training. But it's important to realize that your social media, even if it's on a personal device, even if you send it out personally, if it relates to your government activities, it very likely can be a public record that can be obtained through a public records request. It can also violate the open meetings law, depending on what you're discussing and who you send the social media to, or if you send it out and it gets spoken wheeled, as we've talked about a number of times in open meetings law, and you've heard to other members, it can start a conversation that can, in fact, violate the open meetings law. Even if you didn't in the initial social media post do anything that violated the open meeting law, it can be the start of it. And the one thing that's very important, and this is subject of other parts of the code of conduct, it can confuse or undercut Mountain Line's messaging. Next slide, please. So the bottom line in our code of conduct is Mountain Line supports the use of social media. But it's also important to remember that Mountain Line as an organization must be able to be the one that describes what is spoken on its behalf. And that, I think, is one of those bright line rules that if you utilize that, that'll help you a great deal in properly dealing with social media. Next slide. When we first brought up the code of conduct, questions were asked about, well, I also serve on the city council, or I serve for NAU, or for the county or the other member entities. How do you delineate that? Well, you delineate this in regards for your personal views versus Mountain Line's views, whether it's on behalf of the city or one of the colleges or Mountain Line. It's important for you when you look at it, going back again to what is my goal in making this communication, whether you're expressing your personal views, whether you're expressing views on behalf of your member entity or Mountain Line. And it's very important that if you're referencing Mountain Line or doing something as a Mountain Line official, that's going to be expressing Mountain Line's views. It's going to be seen that way by the public. And then the next one, avoid implying personal views or official views. That's very difficult. You have to walk that line very carefully because, again, when you're talking, it's one thing. When you're putting it down in social media, it's very easy for your personal views to be misconstrued as official views. We recommend you use this disclaimer. Postings on the site are my own and do not reflect or represent the opinions of Mountain Line. That's not a get out of jail free card, but it is a good practice to follow. Next slide. If it's official posts, they're required to be preserved under the public records laws. You also, when you're using social media on behalf of Mountain Line, if you do that, you open up basically a public forum. You legally cannot and definitely should not block critics or individuals expressing differing points of view. Also, if you're doing business on behalf of Mountain Line, not to delete comments or responses. And getting back to the open meetings, we got to be very careful you don't create a digital quorum. Next slide. The other thing is the use of social media during meetings is also dealt with in the code of conduct. Then part of the respect for public meetings, that is a meeting of the board in public, and the discussions are supposed to be all done in public. So it's against the policy to use social media during noticed and agendized meetings. Even if you're not using social media to discuss something that's before the meeting and or should be part of the public meeting, it appears that way. It definitely does. I had that issue on my school board where people were texting back and forth, texting during board meeting. But it is also a violation of, but if you are talking about things that are part of the meeting, that's a violation of the open meetings law. And that's why it's against the policy. Next slide. Also, if you're not careful about social media, there are liabilities and risk to your reputation, but it can be to your ability to be effective. Depending on what you're talking about and how you talk about it, the waiver of privileges and confidentiality, such as those that apply to executive sessions or legal advice. It'll absolutely be used as evidence. The words you use could be used as specifically as admissions of fault or liability, or that something's wrong. Again, open meetings laws and lawsuits. As I said before, social media is a major driver of claims or a major way of proving claims in this day and age. And lawsuits, as we all know, lawsuits don't have to be legitimate to be filed. To your member entities, exact same liability and risk, and the same is true of Mountain Line. Next slide. So here's a quick summary of the rules of the virtual road. Use the my worst enemy filter. Do you want what you're putting out to be something that gets in the hand of your worst enemy, political or personal or otherwise? When you're writing something, think about how that would look in front of a judge or a jury. That's not what I meant. That comes up a lot of times in social media and emails, and email and in both. You start out saying one thing and then somebody misconstrued it and that's not what you meant, and then then goes off. You get off on a whole tangent. This one's hard for me. Humor is hard, and humor does not work in any time of formal business or government emails or social media. It a lot of times can go astray on you very much, and it leads to people taking things out of context. This one happens a lot. I thought I would feel better if I said it, and I don't. I actually one time wrote a very scathing letter to the other side in a dispute, which my secretary, I felt better for writing it. I talked to another attorney, said, yeah, that's very good. I'm glad you feel better. Don't send it. Then I found out my secretary sent it out without me signing it. When I got the response back. It may feel good to write it, but as soon as you hit the send, you've done more than write it. You've now published it to the world. in social media, there's a lot of things of forwarding other things or getting liking or responses. Sorry, my dog is going off in the background. I hope it's not bothering you. I take this rule. I have trouble explaining my own statements. If I like something or forward something that somebody else says, now I have to try to explain their statements because they've now become mine. And that type of chaining becomes very difficult. We're seeing that very, very, very much so in political parties. Whoops, sorry, in political parties these days, as well as things such as the Black Lives Matter and the support the blue. There are issues, things in there that you may agree with, but it also carries a great deal of baggage. The idea that this is just between you and me, that is never true in social media or emails. Emails in particular, oops, who is in the to line? Heather can attest to this. It happens. I have a number of Heathers that I deal with, and every once in a while, Heather gets an email that was supposed to go to a different Heather. It happens, but you want to be very careful. Where I see it is where you have something that's sent to both sides of an issue, and somebody wants to comment, oh, well, the position they're taking is really stupid, or they want to comment on that position, and they reply all, and the other side's in that chain of emails. So that's one of the most, I think, important things in the relating to emails, is be very careful about who is in the to line. Nope, it's okay. Next slide, please. One of the things you should feel comfortable with, and this is one thing that Heather emphasized to me, and I think it's very important, and that is you should feel comfortable in letting Mountain Line set the message and get the information out, and let them do that, because of the process that the Mountain Line follows, or they call it the Mountain Line way, is that staff brings the information to the board early to get you informed, and so that you can make informed decisions and look at various options. So they float concepts and ideas to advance that discussion. But when you're floating ideas and concepts, that may not be what finally is determined. And that after it's determined, then we distribute the information to the public in a formal, measured way when finalized. That's how Mountain Line does it. One of the things you want to important is for not to jump the gun. Things that are being discussed may not happen, or the decision may change, but once it's discussed in public or social media or emails, you have to backtrack, or it gets in the way of getting out, distributing accurate information on the final decision. Next slide. We talk quickly on Article 4, representing Mountain Line. Again, basic principles that we are incorporated into our code of conduct: respecting individual perspectives, backgrounds, and contributions; upholding the strategic goals and priorities. In other words, when we're doing things and making comments, we want to make sure that they're consistent with the goals and priorities that have been set by this board. There are always issues about local considerations, but on the Mountain Line, you need to be looking at what's in the best interest of the authority. And once a good, healthy discussion until decisions are made is important to making good decisions. But once it's adopted as a member of the Mountain Line board, it should represent those positions. Next slide, please. Also, in your role representing the Mountain Line, meetings, attendance is a high priority, and coming prepared to participate. This board is good about that, but that is important, because if we don't have a quorum, no business can be done. Want to avoid divisive or harmful conduct. Again, this board seems to do a very good job of respecting the positions and opinions of the members of the board, and as same to staff, which I think is, in my experiences, you've made very good decisions and been able to do that in a very respectful way. And always remember what you do or what you communicate will always reflect on Mountain Line. Next slide. Article 5 deals with decorum and order at meetings. Again, if you need to show up, if there's no quorum, there's no business. Being prepared. If you're attending by phone, device, or computer, as we're all doing now, it's important to make sure that everybody is able to hear. You can hear, and everybody can hear you. Participate, listen, and focus. And Article 5 talks about voting. Basic idea is if you do, you are appointed to this board. You participate on the board to make the decisions and vote. And if you don't vote, that in essence is a vote with the majority. So that role, even on controversial issues or is important that you actually do vote. Next slide. Meeting decorum and order, address the chair. And this board is good about that. It seems formal, but it actually is a very good role, particularly in we're doing virtual meetings like this. It maintains order. Obeying the chair and waiting for recognition. And this I find is true throughout all organizations. Good decorum rubs off on others. And staying on point, staying on agenda. That's important with complying with the open meetings law, but it's also important for having an effective meeting. Next slide. The other issues that are addressed is that all persons attending a meeting follow the same rules. And violators may be removed by the presiding officer. Presiding officer has the authority for people who are in a public meeting to take them out, have them removed from the meeting. It's again important to remember that your meetings are meetings of the board in public, not with the public, except when you're taking public comments. And even then, if the party violates the rules, presiding officer has the right to maintain the decorum and remove them. Next slide. The Robert's Rules of Order, they're just suggestions for an orderly meeting. I think this board does a good job of complying with them when they are important, but the presiding officer really sets the tone and how things are done. The Robert's Rules of Order, a number of people say, well, that doesn't follow Robert's Rules of Order. It doesn't always strictly align with the open meetings law. And again, it's the presiding officer's job to keep order and decorum. Next slide. Motions must be stated and seconded. So votes by yeas and nays or roll call. This is important for Rhonda. If it's not unanimous, you need to be able to identify and record who voted which way. That's now required, specific requirements of the open meetings law. And failure to vote is a vote with the majority. Next slide. It's also important to remember that as board members, you do not have authority to act individually. The only authority, technically speaking, is the board has is corporate authority to is the body based on a majority vote. It's the body that has the authority, not individual board members. And with that, I think we're at the last slide. Can you go to the next one? Any questions? I very much appreciate having the time. You giving me the time to go through this training, and hopefully it was useful to you. And you can check that box that you now have gone through your training for social media and decorum.
Thank
Madam
you
Chair.
very much. Thank you very much, Scott. Directors, are there any comments or questions?
Madam Chair, this is Steve.
Yes.
Just a comment. I think it was a very good presentation. I like because I've been involved in kind of public meetings and open meeting law and all that stuff for a long time. And it was good to learn a couple of new things. I was not aware that a non-vote was a vote in the majority, which was,
Yeah.
I was not aware. So that's a big aha for me. Thanks.
You know, and the one thing that this was just a good reminder of just the responsibilities that we all hold, and I appreciate that. For many, it is a review. We will be experiencing some new individuals on our board in the near future. And I would hope that they would also have the opportunity to go through this training. Anything else?
Madam
Okay,
Chair, I believe
Yes.
Madam Chair, this is
Rhonda, just a minute, Jim. Rhonda, could you speak up?
I think we got a hand raised for Director McCarthy.
Okay, Jim?
yeah, I put a Q in the chat box.
Yeah, I don't see that.
Yes. Do we need to fill out the form that says we've been trained and send that in?
Yes, please. And I was going to do an email to everyone to send it out again and then ask for it back.
Okay, if you just send it out that one page, we don't have to go through the whole presentation. When I read the presentation, I saw it. But if you could send it, that would simplify it for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's move on to an action item. Consideration and approval of application and execution of contract. Estella?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Estella Hollander, Mobility Planner for Mountain Line. So Mountain Line presented a similar agenda item last month for this grant application. However, there has been one change from August board meeting to when the grant application was submitted. So originally, last month, this application was for technical upgrades for Mountain Line, as well as construction funds for a bus storage facility on NAU's campus. Since then, NAU is not able to commit match at that time, so therefore we switched the project out, and we were able to partner with the city and Metro Plan to leverage Proposition 419 funds for bike and pedestrian projects. So these will be to help fill infrastructure gaps for first last mile connections to transit bus stops. Mountain Line's commitment for the technology upgrades has not changed, so our local match commitment, again, has not changed for this application. Therefore, we are just seeking approval again, since this application changed for that one project. And that is it. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, directors? I think it's pretty clear, and I would just like to thank you for being so nimble with this. You did a terrific job. So do I have a motion to direct staff and continue the application and to execute the contract?
Moved, Jim McCarthy.
Thank you, Jim. Do I have a second?
This is Steve Pruitt. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Steve. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to item 7, to consider COVID-19 reopening plan. Kate?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm going to give a presentation on what we're planning for the COVID-19 reopening plan, and we are looking for adoption of it. I will say we've already moved into the second phase of it, and so just want to recognize that from the get-go. So essentially there are 4 phases of the reopening plan. One is what we're really just calling the highest level of restriction. It's really been implemented line beginning in March, moving through things such as, stopping fare collection so we had more space for operators, requiring masks, putting social distancing signs up in buses, and closing the main office down. So really, it's just the most heightened level of restrictions that we've had. I should add heightened cleaning protocol to that as well. And then in August, we moved into phase 2, where we had reduced service levels all summer because of low ridership, essentially, and to try to have capacity for staffing, who might be out of office due to COVID. We did ramp service back up in August to anticipate an increase in ridership with NAU students coming back to town. And then we did a second ramp up in service when school went back to session. So essentially, we are now back to scheduled full service levels, but all other restrictions remain in place. So masks are still required. We still have heightened cleaning. Office staff remain at home, and we're not doing fare collection, which allows a variety of other savings in terms of safety, if we can put it that way. So the next phase that we would enter is into phase 3. And the big item that changes here is fare collection, but there are a lot of implications of collecting fare. So I'll talk through some of those. The trigger for this that we're proposing is no sooner than 2 weeks after the city enters phase 3. And we do know that the city did enter phase 3, but we would have to meet all the standards within there to be able to move into phase 3. And at this stage, our best estimate is that we couldn't do this until mid-October at the soonest anyways. A big trigger for us being able to do this is to have operator barriers installed so that we can do entry through the front door, which requires passengers to be pretty close to the operators. So we do want like a plexiglass barrier in place, and it's taken us a while to be able to design those and then get those installed. And we're still about 2 weeks out from having that complete. Once that's complete, we'd want to give the public fair notice that we were going to start collecting fare again. And so we'd want at least another 2 weeks to be able to do that. So essentially, at this point, the soonest we could possibly do this is mid-October, and happy to see where things go between now and then if we actually want to move forward. Other things with fare collection is that we do feel like we need to reopen the lobby in order to do that, so that way we can take payments and issue passes and provide the customer service that's needed to collect fare. So that does involve bringing several staff back and having procedures for handling money and fare boxes, things we've been able to just completely avoid until this time. So we're working through quite a bit of items related to that. As I said, we do think we could be ready as early as mid-October. And the trigger is really the city entering the phase 3, which behind that is the data-related triggers about the capacity of the hospital and number of cases. And they are in phase 3 so far. Beyond that, we've looked to a phase 4. We're also proposing that that's in coordination with the city's plan. It's really at the end of the pandemic, and at that stage, we would go back to what we're calling normal operations. Although we anticipate some of the things that we've learned through COVID will remain in place, always heightened cleaning protocols and potentially some telework options for staff as well. But essentially, those would operate under our normal policies and would not be specifically related to COVID-19. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or provide more details on what's in that plan.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion, comment, question on the phases or the plan? Directors?
This is Steve, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Steve, and to the directors, I do not see if you're trying to be acknowledged. So I would just ask that you address me and let me acknowledge you, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, the comment is, of course, definitely based on the need for the organization to reopen, if you will. I think it certainly does enhance the customer experience. And I'm also at the same level looking at the staff based on where they're at in terms of the feeling or the sense that, we're always going to be looking at where the activity for the virus is, and just given whatever occurs with metrics from probably state and county health, we may have to go back and do things that may unwind or rewind or certain decisions that have been made. So, while I'm supportive of this, I just wanted to make sure that for us to consider, and we all have, and I know we do, that, we're taking this as it comes, and that we may have to, revise from what we are currently doing back to what we were doing in the past. We hope not, but again, this is such an unknown. So I'm supportive of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Very good points. Adam, do you have a comment or question?
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Adam Shimoni here. Good to be with you all and good to hear everybody's voices. Just a quick question. Okay, I'm just looking at a text I got from Heather. Yes, Heather, I'm asking about a stored value card. Do we offer a stored value card?
Thank you for the question. We are near implementation of a stored value card. We had really hoped to implement that as we return to fairs, but we may return to fairs and then introduce it just to try and avoid confusion during the reintroduction of fare collection. But we are ready to introduce both online reloading and the stored value card.
Okay, I think that would be a very good tool to have with COVID, especially in our community, just because it would just minimize a lot of the interaction. I know we all understand that, but glad to hear that and glad to hear that's on its way. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I do have a question. Are there triggers? We have triggers moving forward. What are the triggers to step backward, as Vice Chair brought up, that will need to be flexible in what we're doing as we take steps through this pandemic? So do you have any thoughts on that? I'm sure you do, Kate.
Sure, I have some high-level thoughts, and I'll let Heather chime in if she has any others.
Great.
So we've talked about a fair bit and wanting to really, as much as possible, be moving in one direction toward fare collection and then end of the pandemic. But we recognize we just, as Director Peru was saying, we just don't know what this winter is going to look like, and if that's possible. We do feel really good about the measures that we are putting in place for fare collection in terms of having hand sanitizer, social distancing, masks, barriers in place for the operators. So I think feel some capacity to have some uptick in cases. I don't want to say a major uptick in cases under the procedures that we are putting in place. But I do think we probably need to be open to potentially reversing, going stricter. But I'll let Heather weigh in on that as well.
Thanks, Kate. And I just want to kind of tag on to Kate's correct. We're ready to step back if necessary. But as a reminder, one of the steps that we're implementing are barriers to protect our drivers in the buses, and hopefully those barriers will provide us with the opportunity not to go back to rear door boarding or free fare. So we really are making this a change in the atmosphere in the vehicles so that if there is that second wave or an uptick, we don't have to step this particular reinstatement backwards. There are other things we're going to do much more slowly in the hopes of avoiding having to reverse things like bringing staff back to the office. We will really do that on a phased or slow approach because it is hard on staff to have these drastic moves back to the office, back to home, et cetera. So the fare collection piece that we're moving forward with right now, it really is a change in how we do it, and we don't anticipate needing to step that back outside of potentially considering the impact to our lobby and the actual conducting of those sales in our lobby. But we do have pass sales available around the community, and so the lobby is not the only place a fare transaction can take place.
Thank you. And I'd just like to hear the board's impression. It seems as though if we are at a turning point and turning to step backwards, I'm wondering if we need to set a very clear, say, data point in order to do that, or are we just comfortable with allowing kind of this free float decision? So those are just some of my thoughts and questions. Directors? Any comments?
Yeah,
Madam Chair, this is Jim McCarthy. I don't know, are you monitoring the who has their hands up function?
I see, now I see your hand up, but yes, go ahead.
All right, I'll
Director
go
McCarthy.
ahead. I think this discussion is really important. There's no clear yes or no. I think a lot of judgment is involved. I'd like to point out that the decision by the city and the city council was not a unanimous decision. It was a 5-2 decision on going to phase 3. So, and even then there was a lot of talk about, well, we need to phase into this gradually. So I think that's good advice. I can support the proposal that was in the packet, but I think if things turn, we need to be nimble, and I would think Heather and her crew would make changes if it appears to be appropriate. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Madam Chair, this is Steve.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I don't know. My feeling is that I would like us to not adopt a data point, because then we get into the discussion of what data point to adopt.
Okay.
And I think that while there may be a few data points that are certainly relevant to the decision, I would rather have the staff based on, of course, data, but also looking at how mitigation may address the issue. Looking back at, just looking back at the last 7 months, certainly in the very beginning, a lot of the mitigation was being developed and implemented. And so, not that we certainly have all solutions for all types of dimensions of this, but I would rather let the staff provide a full recommendation based on data, based on, of course, safety to our staff and the public, and a whole host of other things. So I guess I would like to just let that be up to the staff to present us with a variety of dimensions of a recommendation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else like to make a comment? And if not, we can move forward with a motion to approve the COVID-19 reopening plan.
So,
no.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is
Yes, Director.
I just wanted to confirm timing for the for the fare collection. That are we going to be able, when they start, not to be collecting cash, or?
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Kagan. Timing wise, we believe the soonest we can have the operator barriers in place, which really feels like a must have, is 2 weeks. And then from that point, we would need another 2 weeks to notice to the public. So mid-October is the timeline where we're, would be the earliest we're able to collect again, is what we're thinking. And we will definitely watch data between now and mid-October to see if that's still appropriate. The other, as far as cash, we have a significant number of people who only use cash. And so for equity reasons, We do feel strongly that if we're going to do this, we have to collect cash, which is one of the reasons we stopped collecting in the first place. So unfortunately, we just have too many unbanked riders and too high of a cash collection, fare collection count to think we can move forward without that.
And then
So
just
sorry, I
wanted to
have
add-
not, sorry. Go ahead. Just
I
a
was just going to add that's the reason we're pursuing the stored value card.
Mhm.
So our pass, you have to have $37 cash to buy it. A stored value card will allow them to purchase that value with as little as a $5 load. That's why we are also looking at mobile ticketing kind of for the same reason. And the consideration with mobile ticketing is to ensure that those that are unbanked have a way to use cash to load that mobile ticket on their device if possible. Because we want to reduce cash, we just aren't there yet.
Yeah, so what it is that, but when it opens up, you still continue to collect cash. What mitigation measures to keep everybody safe in the exchange of cash that you're taking?
Yeah, thank you for that. So a key one is staff barrier, and we will be directing staff, but they're not, sometimes they help people unfold bills or do certain cash items to drop it in the fare box. We'll be directing staff that it's really not appropriate to help people with that, and they need to put the cash in the fare box on their own. And then most of the other touching of fare occurs here at headquarters, actually. And so fare boxes come off of buses and go to a cash room. And we hire Garda, a service to collect the cash for us. And so we have procedures in place where we have upped the ventilation in the cash handling room. We're requiring KN95 masks or better, which we do have a supply of thanks to FTA. And gloves, we're offering like an optional smock for the staff person as well, so that way they can be covering their clothes as they're counting the fare. And then really also looking to, Garda would have to come on site. So we've reviewed Garda's own personnel screening policies, and they match our own. And they would be required to wear masks on site. But additionally, we'll be, taking cash to them rather than having them entering facilities as they have in the past. And so we feel like there's some good procedures there. It's really a limited number of staff who deal with cash after the cash is placed in the fare box on the bus. And as I said, we're trying to not have operators assisting with the cash on the bus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good explanation. Directors, do I have a motion to approve the COVID-19 reopening plan?
Madam Chair, this is Steve.
Yes, Steve.
I would make a motion to that effect, please, and thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Supervisor Babbitt. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much, Kate. Okay, moving on to item number 8, consideration update to financial management policy. CEO, General Manager Heather Dalmolin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. So the staff report and presentation today is to update our existing financial management policies, to incorporate internal control policies as recommended by our annual financial auditing firm, to modify our fund balance requirements per our prior discussions with both the board and the TAC, and to also add by reference the City of Flagstaff recession plan so that we have that in place as our revenues may change in the future. So the sections that we have evaluated and updated for these considerations are section 9, which is accounting, auditing, and financial reporting. And what we've done is add number 2 to include our internal control policies. And I just want to say briefly that we have used various internal controls since we became an agency in 2006. We've always considered those procedures. Those procedures have been tested several times. We have many financial audits completed using those internal controls without issue. When they completed our last audit of our 2019 books, one of the recommendations is that we actually have the board adopt those internal controls. So those controls allow for separation of duties. That's one of the biggest reasons for internal controls, is to ensure those checks and balances are in place. And so I believe the internal controls were included in the packet, and hopefully you've had a chance to review them. If not, we'd be happy to provide them for your review. And again, this is formalizing what we have been using for several years, although we do review regularly to ensure that they stay current. The internal controls are based on the standards of internal control in the federal government. And these are the components of those internal controls: to control the environment, to assess risk, to control activities, to provide information, and to ensure we're monitoring our financial matters. Second to that is a change to section 10, which is risk management. This change includes both the fund balance consideration, and you can see in the last sentence of the number 3 bullet point that we are adding, we have added that when considering service plans and changes, we will consider a minimum of 20% of operating costs as the preferred retained fund balance, keeping the 10% as our overall goal when we're considering our complete operating and capital projects. And then we're also adding number 4, which is by reference the City of Flagstaff recession plan, which we would then follow if City of Flagstaff transit tax collection and those revenues that we are dependent upon start to show signs of a recession. So I wanted to show the implication of the 10% versus 20%. This is our graph that we use regularly during our budget process and also as our mid-year check-in. The red line is our 10% fund balance, and the blue line includes all operating and capital programs through 2026 in this particular example. With the new policy, we would change that so that's $1 million fund balance requirement in year 2026. The change would allow us to just isolate what we have for operating specifically. So this does not account for vehicle replacement. The prior slide did. We had our set aside in match for vehicle replacement. The red line is now at 20% fund balance, and 2026 almost doubles. And again, that's due to the capital set aside we have for matching our vehicles. So both of these will be used as we look at future service planning. This does incorporate, I believe, what the board was asking for in its 20% fund balance being added as a requirement to our financial management policy. And then this is just a quick screenshot of the economic recession plans that the City of Flagstaff has adopted, and we have incorporated that into our total policies. These are the 5 stages of that recession plan that we would then follow to make decisions. Just as an example, our annual tax collection is roughly $6 million. So you can see if we use that 2% ratio, we start to fall into about $120,000 loss of revenue would be an alert for us, and then going up from there. We have not seen a significant loss in revenues of these magnitudes, probably since the Great Recession. Even the revenue projections that we have right now from the city with COVID impacts to our tax collections, we are still sitting at under 5%. And that's everything that I have on the financial management policies, but I would be happy to answer any questions about what we're proposing to change in our policies, or if there are other considerations you would like us to make.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. I'm wondering if we could just stop for a second, and there's some housekeeping things. would someone try to unmute Supervisor Babbitt's phone? Can you do that?
Madam Chair, we're not able to unmute participants from our end. They have to do it from their end.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
very
no,
much.
hi, Jamie.
Oh,
Yeah,
hey.
it was not allowing me.
Oh,
It was not allowing me, but I think we got it.
okay, very good, very good.
Allowing.
Do you have something you would like to add, Supervisor Babbitt?
No, it was on the last opening plan and we're all past that, so
Okay,
keep moving forward.
okay, thank you. Okay, directors, are there any questions or comments for our general manager on that presentation? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Heather, appreciate it. Do we have a motion to approve the update to the financial management policy to incorporate internal control policies, fund balance requirements, and add by reference the City of Flagstaff's recession plan?
I move to approve that. Jim McCarthy.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Do we have a second?
Second, Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Supervisor Babbitt. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you all very much. Moving on to, let me see. Moving on to item number 9. Sam, will you talk to us about our human trafficking awareness partnership?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here to provide an update on the Human Trafficking Awareness Partnership Project. So this project was initiated in January of 2020 when Mountain Line was awarded a grant from the FTA for Innovations in Transit Public Safety. As a part of this project, Mountain Line has partnered with the Northland Family Help Center to leverage existing efforts with the Flagstaff Initiative Against Human Trafficking, or FIAT. FIAT's a branch of the Northland Family Help Center. There are 4 components to this project. The first component is a human trafficking awareness campaign. The second component is training for frontline staff. The third component is e-alerts. And the fourth component is that Mountain Line will be providing free bus passes to human trafficking survivors to assist them in their reentry into society. And we'll be providing 25 passes for 75 passes total. So through these components, we are working closely with the Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking, or FIAT. So the first component is the awareness campaign, which will be used to create awareness throughout the Mountain Line community regarding human trafficking, identifying suspicious behavior, and how to report human trafficking and that behavior. So marketing materials will be placed on the inside and outside of Mountain Line buses, as well as on media posts. FIAT will also be updating their trifold brochure, which is distributed throughout the community. The images on this slide are just examples of what the human trafficking campaign would look like, and they are still in the draft stages as of right now and still being worked on. So the ads will contain red flag indicators of human trafficking and where to report human trafficking. So the second component of the project is training. Through the Flagstaff Initiative Against Trafficking, they will be providing Mountain Line trainers with train the trainer instruction on how to recognize human trafficking, reporting, identification, and so on. After that training is conducted, our training staff here at Mountain Line will then provide this training to all Mountain Line part of the training element will be that all of the frontline staff will receive de-escalation training from the Flagstaff Police Department. We've already agreed to do so as soon as we can bring them to our facility. So the third component is eLerts. eLerts is a phone app that pretty much anyone can download onto their phone. It's also known as a CSA Now app, and any customer, employee, or anyone in the community at large can download this app onto their phone and report different items to mountain line staff in real time. So some of those report types that they can provide to us in real time are safety and security concerns, human trafficking, suspicious activity, comments or complaints, kudos for mountain line staff, or they can choose to contact the police directly by using this app. So that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Directors?
Madam Chair? Steve?
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't have
Vice Chair.
questions. I don't have questions, but I certainly want to just comment on certainly the need for these types of resources to address some terrible situations in our community. So I'm wholeheartedly in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Babbitt.
Yeah, just a quick comment as well. Super supportive of this, and you know, worked a lot with Northland family over the years with this and Fiat. I wanted to bring something to the attention of the board, which does not often get you know, discussed in the community with a lot of the intensity of chatter that goes on. But for folks, I would encourage you to look up the role of ICE in sex trafficking and the amount of resources and agents who are part of that organization, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That is who does the sex trafficking up here. And, you know, the intensity of other conversations drowns out the unbelievable work sometimes that gets done by others. And I've had the opportunity to meet with some of the agents here around sex trafficking. And, you know, you want a illuminating and eye-opening conversation. Some of them may be willing to reach out and have those, but on behalf of those that I've had, it is a pretty powerful group of dedicated agents who are involved in this, and they are so supportive of the larger picture. But, you know, the world of Immigration and Customs Enforcement gets, you know, taken over by high intensity conversations. Really important piece of work they do up here that not many folks know about. So I just wanted to share that with the board.
Thank you, Director Babbitt. I too have had that opportunity and agree with you 100%. I do have a question. The call police button, is that the 911 number, or would that be the other number, 1212?
No, ma'am, I reached out to the Flagstaff Police Department and actually met with them about the eLerts
Yes.
app, and they chose to have that go to their non-emergency line if somebody does hit the call police button.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for your work on this. It is needed. And in our board meeting, CEO Del Nolan and I discussed also moving forward when the time is right with the mental health first aid training, and she assured me that that will also be coming. So I have deep gratitude for your willingness to take care of not only your staff and leadership, but the public. So thank you very much. Any other comments or questions about this program?
Madam Chair, Jim McCarthy, I just want to say I'm very supportive. And I'm also very glad, Ms. Whalen, that there's going to be first aid for mental health training. I think, that could really help. That's a really good idea.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, no further direction is needed, so thank you all very much. And thank you, directors. Moving on to item 10, consideration and owners represent for the Downtown Connection Center. Kate, will you bring us up to date?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I briefly mentioned this when giving the DCC update at the last meeting. We wanted to provide an opportunity for a more robust discussion if the board chose. So I'm not looking for any particular recommendation at this time, just general direction. Ultimately, if we were to go down the path of procuring an owner's rep for the Downtown Connection Center, the contract would be large enough to need the board's approval. So we would look for action at that time. So some of the things we've been talking about as we're working to kick off the design of the Downtown Connection Center are the capacity of staff and internal knowledge to manage the project ourselves in-house. And obviously we're using architects and engineers and construction contractors along the way, but it's really the ability to provide the appropriate level of oversight for what will be a very public project in the heart of downtown. So a couple of benefits of pursuing an owner's rep are to augment staff capacity, as I just talked about. We also have a lot of other projects going on right now and really, haven't found ourselves able to dedicate the amount of time we feel like this project needs to date. We also could benefit from an owner's representative financial planning and partnership experience. We are looking at, essentially a partnership with the City of Flagstaff, maybe bringing in human service agencies. We've talked, about the potential for a cell tower on site that could generate some revenue. We're not looking at any of those huge partnerships anymore, but even those little partnerships need attention and someone looking out for Mountain Line's best interest who has those experiences in mind. An owner's rep could also provide oversight of this planning and design phase that we're just entering into. AECOM is on contract to do that, but they could provide additional reviews and insights as we move through that project or that process. Once we get to construction, having someone on site, making sure that everything is going according to plan, that our best interests are being met in terms of any change orders that are requested or materials that are being used is all going to be very important and not something that we have the time and capacity to manage internally. And then finally, doing project closeout items and really wrapping up and making sure that we check all the boxes. And so this person, unlike other contracts that we'll have, or this person or firm, unlike other contracts that we have on the Downtown Connection Center, would be on for the entirety of the project, which is also something that's different. It's not the design firm moving in and then transitioning to a different team for final design that wasn't a part of that, and then transitioning to a construction team that maybe wasn't a part of that. So the continuity of someone to be present and working through the whole history of the project, I think, is also a key component of this proposal. So it is expensive, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to bring it forward to the board. We anticipate it would be 2 to 3% of the cost of the project. We would pay for it through the Downtown Connection Center grant. Obviously, that then diminishes the amount of money we have to put into the actual construction. But we do believe that the risk management that comes from having an owner's rep could really be worth that expense. As a reminder, the Downtown Connection Center grant is an 80-20 split, so that's how that would be paid for. And there is a goal that by having a good owner's rep firm, you save costs elsewhere. And so hopefully we would be able to, reap back some of that benefit or some of that cost that we put into the owner's rep by having them find efficiencies elsewhere in the project. So ultimately the goals are, to find those efficiencies, make sure we get the most bang for our buck, to ultimately have a better project for the Downtown Connection Center in the end, and really to protect Mountain Line's reputation as we're moving through this by having that high level of oversight. And so that's my brief update of what we're considering. And again, there's no action at this time. It's really just looking for, confirmation or direction from the board about this approach.
Madam Chair, this is McCarthy.
Yes, Director McCarthy?
I do think this is a very important idea. It's kind of interesting. This is the exact kind of work that I did when I was an engineer down at Honeywell for 26 years. And I was involved from the proposal stage to are there problems in the field, field problems. So it's very important. So I do support it. My other thought is, have you talked to the city of Flagstaff? I mean, we have program managers or project managers that do this type of work now. And I'm wondering if some type of relationship with the city could be worked out, or if it would be just to hire someone from the outside. Have both of those options been reviewed?
Thank you, Director McCarthy. I have spoken with Dan Folk and Christine Cameron, one of the project managers over there, about this concept. And Christine in particular really felt like this was a good direction for Mountain Line to go. The staff at the city of Flagstaff are, pretty well built out with projects as is. And her take on it was that somebody really needed to be focused on this downtown connection center. And that the owner's rep firm could bring additional experience to the project that one of the project managers at the city of Flagstaff wouldn't do in terms of the partnership piece or some of those other relationship pieces we might be looking for. So I was able to speak with them. I think they both felt like this owner's rep scenario was a good idea, but we did talk about opportunities for Mountain Line to essentially hire out a project manager at the city, but didn't seem like that was the most supported direction to go.
Well, I'm glad that you at least thought it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McCarthy. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, this is Steve.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Again, the role of this individual or firm is so important from the standpoint of just being the owner's rep and looking at, of course, all the obvious things that they would be doing in terms of construction, but also, I think also to hear from the standpoint of our reputation is important. Getting a reputation of not being a, how are you going to call it, a good customer does impact our ability going forward, because that certainly looks, and it's looked at in the construction community that way. And so going forward, there may be projects that construction firms would not bid on based on a reputation. And so I think it's really important to have an owner's rep that is looking at our reputation, in addition to being obviously the stewards of public monies in the project. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, in closing, I certainly would hope, I do support this 100%. And in negotiating, I would hope we would go after the 2% first. And I think this is an excellent idea. This is a very important project with a lot of moving pieces, and to have someone that you can trust and confide in is a good idea. You deserve this. So thank you. Directors, one last time. Okay. Let's move on. Progress reports. Deputy General Manager, do you want to say anything about your update?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a general update. I provided the big change that has happened with the AECom contract is the task order for the Downtown Connection Center, which was approved last month. And so not much has changed since that time, but everything's moving forward well, and kickoff for the Downtown Connection Center so far is going great.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And how about the current events? General Manager, would you like to say anything about that? We have some things we could celebrate.
We do have a couple things to celebrate. So you have, Rhonda did send this out this morning, but I'll call your attention to a couple of things. We've initiated training for our operations supervisor team. And so those are the people who do the in the field and in the dispatch office supervision of tasks and duties of our operators on a daily basis. This is new for us. We have not provided them with training in the past, and it's going very well. It seems to be well received and appreciated, and it's building some really good camaraderie amongst those team members. So we're very excited about that. In addition, we hired 7 new operators, and they're scheduled to graduate in October. This is on the heels of another class that graduated a couple weeks ago with 5 trainees who are now operating independently in our service. And so this is 2 very successful classes back to back, and I congratulate our operations and training teams on that. We are quickly approaching full staffing for the first time in quite some time. So we're very excited about that and really good candidates. Wanted to draw your attention to the $300,000 competitive grant that we received through the Community Transportation Association of America, and give a lot of kudos to Kate and her team, including Estella, who is our grant writer extraordinaire. This grant will allow us to plan and demonstrate a mobility on demand project in the Huntington corridor. Our goal is really to be able to mimic that in other areas that aren't real fixed route transit friendly, but certainly have public transportation needs. So we're pretty excited about that. And one I didn't include in my current events, but I'd like to acknowledge is the grant that Estella talked about earlier today. That change was made 2.5 days before the application was made, and Estella really led the team and got that grant submitted. So I want to recognize her hard work and efforts to redo the work she had spent 3 weeks or more doing and completing it in 2.5 days to get it submitted on time. So I know she had support from others, Martin and the city and members of FMPO, but truly it's Estella's leadership that accomplished that. So I just wanted to give those kudos while we had a moment.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to need to do, and I would support everyone to read those updates. Estella, thank you for your hard work. Congratulations, Kate and Lori. We've got some beautiful masks coming our way and some polos. Let's move on to the next. We're going to need to close and open up an executive session. So do we need to close the public, Scott, or just move into executive?
Madam Chair, we are just going to move everyone that's required into the executive session breakout rooms. And on the live stream, the public will see that a executive session is in progress. So then the recording is paused, and we just need a motion to do that.
Okay. And just to clarify, Rhonda, we stay exactly where we're at, correct?
Correct. John will move you into the break.
Okay.
And then after, move you out. So.
Great. Thank you, John. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved, McCarthy.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second, Steve.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Seeing none opposed. We are now in executive session. John, have you moved us?
No, it's gonna take just a couple minutes,
Okay,
so we'll be
Let us
back
know.
with you.
thank you.
John, this is Scott Holcomb. Sam Kaufman may be joining us. I just told him to contact in. So if he does, would you let him into the executive session, please?
Will do, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, this is Steve. I'm going to step away for about 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Thank you, Steve.
So Rhonda, Rick Tadler or Danelle?
Rick Tatter would not, and it's up to you about Danelle. Danelle was in the last time.
Yes, you can.
Hit sign in this. So yes,
Oh,
and then
Yeah.
the board.
later today. Okay, so I'll scan this, Jamie. Is an electron. Right here. Okay. And then, yeah, electronic, so
Let's start.
that would probably be easier. And
Do
then
you want me
to
to-
Lori.
And then to Lori. Email to her that kind of should be started.
Okay.
As they join. Yeah. So Rhonda, you'll have
I
to
can do that.
join there.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Scott Holcomb. I also have a noon meeting I'd like to be able to join if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott, for joining us.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Rhonda, let me know when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are ready.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're resuming the public meeting. Just as a FYI, our next meeting will be held Wednesday, October 21st. And that will be a board and TAC advance. And I think that's about it. Next board meeting will be November 16th, 2020. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I don't know that you need one, but if you need one, I so move.
Thank you, and I'll second it. And so we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, leadership. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, board.